A few years ago, I started paying closer attention to where money actually disappears. Not the obvious disappearances, not the tax bill everybody complains about, not the stock market decline that shows up on a screen and frightens people for a week. I mean the quiet disappearances, the ones society trains you not to question, the ones that do not look reckless while they are happening. The ones people defend with phrases like that is just normal. Everybody does it, it is only a little more. It is only monthly, it is good quality, it is an investment, it is a once-in-a-lifetime day. It is only a subscription. Those are the dangerous ones. Because obvious waste usually announces itself. Quiet waste enters wearing manners. It enters dressed as adulthood, taste, convenience, security, generosity, self-care, prudence, romance, or reward. Then it settles into the house and starts draining capital one decision at a time. I have watched this all my life. People imagine wealth is mainly destroyed by spectacular stupidity. Sometimes it is, but more often wealth is prevented from forming in the first place by a long sequence of ordinary choices that feel socially approved and financially harmless. A little too much house, a little too much phone, a little too much jewelry, because the story attached to it feels ancient and noble, a little too much furniture, too many subscriptions, too many add-ons, too much false protection, too many purchases that get renamed investments, so the buyer does not have to admit he simply wanted the thing. That is how the seed corn gets eaten. And because each bite is small, the person never feels like a foolish spender. He feels normal. Normal is expensive. That is one of the hardest lessons in personal finance. So let me tell you, as plainly as I can, the 8 things I have seen act like quiet termites in otherwise decent households. Not because every dollar spent in these places is always wrong. That would be childish. I am not interested in turning life into a gray room with no flowers. I am interested in helping people stop wasting real future freedom on purchases and patterns they never truly examined. The first is buying cheap. Now people hear that and think I am speaking against thrift. I am not. I admire thrift very much. I have practiced it all my life. What I do not admire is false thrift, which is a completely different thing. False thrift is when a person buys the cheapest thing in front of him, not because it is the best value, but because the low sticker price gives him immediate emotional relief. Then the object breaks, fails, irritates, clutters the house, or performs badly enough that he eventually buys again. He has not saved money, he has purchased delay, and delay is often expensive. The old phrase, buy cheap, buy twice survives, because it keeps proving itself true in ordinary life. Shoes, kitchen tools, office chairs, suitcases, home appliances, basic electronics, all sorts of things become more expensive. When the first purchase was made with no thought beyond getting through the checkout as painlessly as possible. But there is another part of this that interests me even more. Once people make the cheap purchase, they often cannot bring themselves to get rid of it when it clearly is not working. That is the sunk cost fallacy, one of the great little thieves of adult life. A person keeps the bad blender in the cupboard because throwing it away feels wasteful. He keeps the poor quality headphones in the drawer because he paid for them. He keeps the useless exercise equipment, the bad kitchen gadget, the synthetic shirt that never fit properly, the chair that hurts his back, the online course he never finished, even sometimes the wrong job or the wrong relationship, because abandoning the thing feels like admitting the earlier cost was lost. The cost is already lost. That is the part people fight. Keeping the thing does not get the money back. It only adds a second loss on top of the first by consuming space, attention, and sometimes future money too. I have always liked simple questions before you buy something cheap. Ask how often you will use it. If the answer is every day, cheap may be a very expensive choice. If the answer is once a year, then perhaps cheap is fine, or perhaps the right answer is do not buy it at all. That is the second question. Do you need it? A shocking number of cheap purchases are not failed solutions to real problems. They are little fantasies bought in physical form. A person imagines the organized kitchen, the fitter body, the tidier desk, the new hobby, the repaired home life. The object is purchased because it flatters the fantasy. Then it sits there quietly proving that the problem was never lack of a cheap object. Cheap things cost people twice, first at the register, then again in clutter and replacement. The second quiet waste is buying a bigger home than you need. This one can change the entire next 20 years. A man walks into a mortgage conversation with one number in mind. He can afford a house around $500,000 perhaps, with a down payment saved honestly over years. Then the lender says something magical: you qualify for more. That sentence has probably done more hidden financial damage to middle-class balance sheets than most people realize, because qualifying for more is not the same as benefiting from more. What the bank is really telling you is not that the bigger house is wise. It is telling you how much monthly obligation your present income can technically be leaned against under current conditions. That is a very different statement. People hear possibility, the bank hears debt service, then the mind begins decorating: a better neighborhood, one more bedroom, a nicer yard, a slightly more impressive life. And because the monthly payment still looks manageable today, the whole thing feels reasonable. But a mortgage is one of those decisions people chronically underprice because they focus on the payment and ignore the attached ecosystem. The larger house means more interest over decades. It usually means higher taxes, higher insurance, higher heating and cooling, more maintenance, more furnishing, more repairs, more little things that are never little in the aggregate. The source material gave a clear example that captures the difference beautifully. Borrow around $450,000 at 4% over 30 years, and the lifetime repayment moves into the neighborhood of $773,000, including over $323,000 in interest. Push the loan to roughly $550,000 at the same rate, and you move toward about $944,000 repaid, with nearly $400,000 in interest. That is not just one extra bedroom, that is a long transfer of future freedom, and that assumes the world stays well-behaved. Income may not. Rates may not if the next house requires future refinancing. Children may arrive, parents may need help, health may wobble, employment may change. The monthly payment that looks respectful and manageable at the closing table can become the thing that stares back at you in the dark. 3 years later, I have never believed a home must expand every time a family expands a little. There is no divine law saying a baby must arrive to a spare room that looks like a magazine page. There is no moral failure in a child sharing space for a while. People often forget that a smaller house held longer can be a giant strategic advantage. Lower fixed costs mean more room for investing, more room for reserve, more room for flexibility, more room for saying no to things that would have trapped the household in a larger life with less actual freedom. A big house can be beautiful. It can also be a quiet machine that consumes your best investing years. The third waste is upgrading your phone every year or two as though it were a civic duty. I understand the seduction. Phones are beautifully designed objects, and the payment structure has been engineered to make expensive decisions feel casual. It is no longer one shocking outflow. It is a monthly amount tucked inside a plan, partially softened by trade, in credits and technical language about storage tiers, camera systems, brighter displays, artificial intelligence features, and whatever else the manufacturers are using this season to make the old device feel suddenly obsolete. But the economics are very plain. If you are paying something like $45 a month over 2 years, you are spending a little over $1,000 on that device cycle. Do that repeatedly over a decade, and you can lose $5,000, $6,000, even $7,000 or more to a pattern that never felt very dramatic in any single year. The source material notes that 25% of Americans expected to upgrade within 1 to 2 years versus 15% a few years earlier, and gives current price examples where choosing a smaller storage or slightly older iPhone can save hundreds immediately. That is the sort of spread people ignore because the new phone does not feel like a capital decision. But it is a capital. It is not only the phone itself, it is the habit of replacing what still works, because novelty has become confused with need. This is where a person must ask a harder question. Am I buying a better tool, or am I buying the feeling of staying current? Those are not the same thing. A businessman can buy a better computer because it saves him time and improves his output. That is rational. A person whose 3-year-old phone still performs all necessary functions but keeps upgrading because the monthly cost feels harmless is not buying utility. He is renting novelty. Novelty is expensive because it never stays purchased. And as with many wastes, the real issue is not that the person loves technology. The issue is that he has not priced what the habit is doing to the larger machine. If keeping the current device 2 extra years and switching to a lower cost plan would free meaningful capital for investing, then the question is not whether you are entitled to a new phone. You are entitled to anything you can afford. The question is whether the difference in actual utility is worth the difference in long-term compounding. That is the adult question. The fourth waste is diamonds bought under the spell of inherited marketing. This one is fascinating because it reveals how deeply advertising can become tradition once enough time passes. People still speak as though a diamond engagement ring costing 1 month of salary, or 2 months, or 3 months, were some ancient measure of devotion handed down by civilization itself. Much of it came from De Beers marketing. That should make people pause. I am not hostile to sentiment. A ring can matter, symbols matter, beauty matters, marking a life event matters, but symbols are most expensive when people stop asking where the script came from. A great many buyers do not realize that the second they walk out of the shop, much of the retail markup has already evaporated. They are not buying something with especially robust resale economics. They are buying a retail story with a substantial branding and distribution premium inside it. The source material points out that many lab-grown diamonds are chemically and visually equivalent enough that even trained gemologists need equipment to tell the difference, while prices can be 30 to 70% lower. That is not a small spread. That is an education problem. If a diamond is genuinely important to you, fine, but at least buy it with your eyes open. Know that second-hand, vintage, custom-made, or lab-grown alternatives may preserve the meaning while destroying much of the unnecessary cost. The waste is not in caring. The waste is in sleepwalking into an expensive ritual you never truly priced. And this principle extends well beyond jewelry. Anytime society tells you that an expression of love must be expensive to be valid, you should become suspicious. Love is not improved by retail markup. The fifth waste is labeling luxury purchases as investments. I see this one constantly. A person wants something expensive. A bag, a chair, a watch, a desk, a wardrobe refresh, a premium coffee machine, a piece of furniture, a wellness device, something large enough that calling it a treat would feel slightly irresponsible. So the brain starts searching for a more respectable category. This is an investment. I will use it for years. It is good quality. It might save money in the long run. Once the brain finds that sentence, something very interesting happens. It starts collecting evidence in favor of the purchase and quietly ignoring the rest. That is confirmation bias. It is one of the most elegant internal sales systems ever invented. Now, let me be fair. Some purchases do genuinely save money over time. Some improve productivity, some improve health or reduce recurring costs. Some are absolutely worth it. I am not arguing that every expensive item is foolish. I am arguing that most luxury goods do not become investments, merely because the buyer finds a noble justification for wanting them. An investment in the strict financial sense should either grow in value, generate income, materially improve future earning power, or reduce future cost in a measurable and meaningful way. A designer bag usually does not. A beautiful chair may improve comfort, but that does not automatically make it a financial asset. A high-end object may be worth buying simply because you like it and can afford it. That is enough. You do not have to lie to yourself to give yourself permission. In fact, the lie is what creates the danger. Because once a person starts reclassifying consumption as investment, his budget becomes harder to govern. Everything now has a noble reason attached to it. The house is an investment, the car is an investment in family comfort, the bag is an investment in long-term style, the office is an investment in productivity, the vacation is an investment in memories, the coffee machine is an investment in saving cafe money. The problem is not that none of these things ever contain some truth. The problem is that once spending gets baptized this way, discipline becomes very difficult because the line between consumption and capital allocation dissolves. I prefer honesty. If it is a luxury, call it a luxury. Then decide calmly whether it deserves a place in your life. The sixth waste is extended warranties. This is another place where fear gets sold in tiny monthly pieces. You are about to buy a television, laptop, appliance, or some other household object. The main purchasing decision is made. You have mentally accepted the big number. Then the final little prompt appears, inviting you to protect yourself for just a little more, $5 extra a month. A small ad on better safe than sorry. This sounds prudent. It is often just highly profitable for the seller. Most products do not fail during the extended warranty window. And when they do, the repair cost is often less than the total premium paid for the warranty itself. Meanwhile, many people are already covered more than they realize through manufacturer warranties, retailer policies, or even credit card purchase protections and extended warranty benefits. The source text points this out quite directly, and it is one of those ordinary financial truths people overlook because the ad on is offered at the moment fear and fatigue are highest. That timing is not an accident. The companies know exactly when to ask. Once the person has decided to spend the larger amount, the smaller protective amount feels painless, and no one wants to feel irresponsible at the checkout counter. But prudence is not the same thing as buying every insurance. Like product available, a better system is to self. Insure many of these little risks. Keep a small repair fund. Let the money stay yours unless the problem actually appears. Over time, that habit is usually cheaper than handing away premium after premium for low probability events that often never occur. Extended warranties are not offered so aggressively because they help customers so efficiently. They are offered because they make excellent money. That is what people should remember. The seventh waste is weddings that go past celebration and become financial vandalism. Now, I must tread carefully because I do not believe weddings are automatically a waste. Far from it, there are very few days in life when two families, two histories, and all the people you truly love gather into one room for something solemn and joyful. That matters, ceremony matters, memory matters. I would never tell a person not to spend thoughtfully on a day that may hold a lifetime of emotional value. But thoughtful spending and social overreach are not the same thing. Weddings become wasteful when people stop designing a day and start financing a performance. The venue gives the tour, the brochure appears, the initial number may even feel lower than expected. That is where many people get trapped, because the venue itself is only the start. Then come the dress, the suit, the photographer, the flowers, the drinks, the room, the transportation, the cake fees, the family expectations, the comparison with other weddings, the extras not included, the things everyone else seemed to have, the beautiful touches that each look small in isolation and absurd in the total. The emotional cover story is powerful. It is only once. It will be worth it. You cannot put a price on memories, no, but you can absolutely price debt. And that is where I draw the line. If a wedding pushes a couple into debt at the beginning of a marriage, the day has been built too expensively. Marriage does not need the gift of an opening liability structure. The source text puts this with refreshing honesty. If you end up borrowing for the wedding, things have probably gone too far. I agree. A wedding should be designed around what matters to the couple, not around what makes the relatives comfortable or what copies well from other people. Photos list, the things that genuinely matter, protect those. Give yourselves permission to skip the rest. That is maturity. And saying no early is usually much cheaper than saying yes everywhere. And spending the first year of marriage servicing a bill from a day already past. The eighth waste is streaming subscriptions and the whole economy of paid options you barely use. I like entertainment. I am not arguing that no one should pay for it. If a person watches enough to truly enjoy the services, then the spending may be entirely reasonable. But what many people are really buying is not use. They are buying the comfort of available choice. That is a different product, and a much more expensive one than people realize. The source document points out that the average American is spending around $552 a year on streaming subscriptions, and that many households are paying for 4 or more services at once. That would be fine if usage matched the payment. Often it does not. People subscribe to watch one show, they forget to cancel the trial. They maintain multiple services because each one might have something they want someday. Then the months pass and the debit continues with no particular notice. This is one reason recurring charges are so dangerous. They turn decisions into furniture. Once the debit becomes part of the room, no one questions it anymore. That is why every household needs a subscription audit more often than it thinks it does. How much of what you are paying for did you actually use last month? Not imagined use, not potential use, real use. If you need 4 services to justify themselves, how many hours are you actually consuming on each one? Once you do the arithmetic, the answer is often mildly embarrassing. But embarrassment is useful if it saves money. Now let me bring all 8 together, because otherwise this becomes a list when it should become a lens. Buying cheap, buying too much house, upgrading phones too often, overpaying for diamonds because marketing became tradition, renaming luxury spending as investment, buying extended warranties out of checkout fear, letting weddings become debt, funded theater, accumulating streaming and subscription charges because option value feels like actual value. What connects them? They all exploit the same human weakness. They make people spend without fully pricing the future cost. Sometimes the cost is direct money, sometimes it is interest, sometimes it is clutter, sometimes it is psychological drag, sometimes it is foregone investment, sometimes it is simply the habit of making decisions by default rather than by design. And that is what I really want people to hear. The issue is not that every non-essential purchase is wrong. The issue is whether the purchase was examined. You may choose the diamond. Fine, choose it awake. You may choose the wedding. Fine, choose it within a line you can afford. You may choose the better chair, the nicer phone, the bigger television, the premium coat, the subscription you genuinely use. Fine, just do not drift into them because society told you they were normal. Normal is where money goes to disappear. I have always believed money works best when it has a job. Investing, building reserves, buying flexibility, reducing permanent fixed costs, funding something you deeply value and truly use. The problem with many of these wastes is not simply that they are expensive. It is that they are expensive and jobless. They do not meaningfully improve the future. They simply flatter the present. And the present is a seductive liar when there's a credit card nearby. So what would I replace these habits with? Buy quality when the object solves a repeated problem and will be used often. Otherwise, do not confuse low sticker price with value. Buy less house than the bank says you can afford and enjoy the margin as a strategic asset. Keep the phone longer and let boredom fund your investments. Treat diamonds as jewelry, not mythology. And price the alternatives. Honestly, call luxury purchases what they are. So your budget remains truthful. Self-insure many small product risks instead of buying every warranty pushed in your face. Spend on a wedding with intention, not debt. Audit subscriptions ruthlessly and stop paying for fantasies of future viewing. Then do one final thing. The thing that matters most: review your spending regularly. That one habit changes everything because occasional mistakes are not fatal. Uninspected patterns are, if you look at your spending often enough, a wasteful month is just a correction waiting to happen. If you never look, a wasteful decade becomes your identity. I do not want that for anybody. Life is expensive enough without paying for habits you never chose consciously. The point is not to become stingy. The point is to stop being careless with the part of your life that could have become freedom if you had kept it. That is all money really is. Stored choices, stored time, stored future ease. And when you start seeing it that way, a great many normal purchases stop looking so normal after all. Now let me go one layer deeper, because people often misunderstand what I am trying to protect. I am not protecting dollars for their own sake. I am protecting compounding. That is the real victim every time an unnecessary pattern becomes permanent. A person overpays for a phone upgrade, and the cost does not end at the store or in the monthly installment. The cost continues because the money no longer goes where it could have gone. A person takes the larger house, and the larger house keeps taking. A person keeps 4 or 5 subscriptions he barely uses. And what disappears each month is not only entertainment leakage, it is buying power that no longer enters the future machine. Compounding is not loud enough in the early years to defend itself emotionally. That is why waste is so easy. The better sofa is visible. The cleaner kitchen gadget looks helpful. The upgraded phone feels current. The wedding package feels beautiful. The warranty feels prudent. The investment label feels intelligent. The cost of future compounding feels like nothing because it happens in silence. The market does not send a letter saying you have just sold away 12 years of later ease for a decision that did not need to be made. It just accepts the missing capital and keeps going without you. That is why adults need a system stronger than mood. I like very simple systems: a waiting period on non-essential purchases, a written luxury budget rather than emotional guesswork, a recurring subscription audit, a question before every large purchase: will this item improve my life enough to deserve what it steals from my future? If the answer is vague, the purchase is usually weak. I also like asking a tougher question: if nobody else could see this purchase, would I still want it? That one question destroys a remarkable amount of bad spending. A large share of expensive consumption is theater. The person does not want the object alone. He wants the message the object sends. But if the message disappears and the desire disappears with it, then the spending was never really about utility, comfort, or beauty. It was about audience. Audience spending is almost always expensive and usually unsatisfying. I would rather buy fewer things that solve real problems, last well, and require no explanation. That brings me back to buying cheap. There is a useful principle here that applies far beyond household goods. Cheap is dangerous whenever the item sits at a repeated point of friction in your life. A mattress, a chair, shoes, a winter coat, a daily tool, a kitchen knife used constantly, the computer you work on, the bag you carry every day. A bad version of a daily tool taxes the same place again and again. It irritates, it wastes time, it lowers quality, it often gets replaced. That is why true value lives at the intersection of frequency and durability. If the item sits there every day, quality matters. But if the item solves no real problem at all, then even the cheap version may be too expensive because the right purchase was never the object. The right purchase was restraint. This is another reason large homes become such a trap. Once the bigger space exists, the world comes running to fill it. Furniture expands to meet the room. Decor expands to meet the blankness. Storage expands to meet the unused corners. The house does not merely cost more. It creates demand for more things. People think they are buying square footage. Sometimes they are buying an entire future lifestyle inflation channel. That channel rarely closes itself. The same thing happens with weddings. One larger venue creates pressure for larger flowers, better photographs, more thoughtful favors, more polished outfits, a more beautiful dinner, an upgraded bar, another hour, another room, another flourish. Excess spending is social. It cascades. This is why boundaries matter more than budgets in some situations. A budget can slide if the boundary itself is weak. A strong boundary sounds like this: we are not borrowing for this. Or this: we are not buying a house that makes us depend on every future paycheck. We are not paying recurring subscriptions for idle fantasies. We are not calling consumption investment just to avoid discomfort. Those are not killjoy sentences. They are liberty sentences. The people who feel most trapped by money are often not those who spend the most at once. They are the ones who let small permanent drains colonize the structure of life. A household can survive a silly one-time purchase more easily than it can survive a decade of unexamined monthly leakage. That is why every good financial life needs a regular sweep. What is still useful? What is still loved? What is still earning its place? What is still true? People assume that financially strong households are those that never make mistakes. Nonsense. Strong households make mistakes all the time. They simply catch them quickly. That is, the real strength review is more important than perfection. You can buy the wrong subscription and fix it next month. You can buy one foolish luxury and adjust the category afterward. You can make a poor household purchase and learn from it. But if you never review anything, the mistakes stop being events and become a lifestyle. Lifestyle is where waste becomes identity. I do not want that for you. I do not want a person to wake up at 58 and discover that the reason retirement looks thin is not one dramatic catastrophe, but a long line of unchallenged normals that is avoidable, not perfectly, but meaningfully. And that is enough. If you want a practical test, use this before any non-essential spending. Ask 4 questions. Will I use it often enough to justify the cost? If it is premium, what measurable problem does the premium solve? If I call this an investment, what real return does it produce? And if I skip it, where would the money go instead? That last question may be the most valuable of all because it forces the hidden comparison into daylight. The purchase is not competing against zero. It is competing against future flexibility, against reserves, against investments, against peace, against a right to say no later. That is a much more serious contest. Once you frame it that way, some purchases still win. Good, they should. Life is meant to be lived, not merely optimized into dust, but now the purchase will have been chosen. That is the difference. Chosen spending can be joyful. Unexamined spending is usually just drift with better packaging. I have never wanted drift for myself, and I would not recommend it to anyone else.